Hello, everybody, and welcome to this EI Tech Talk, where today we will be taking an in-depth look at remote monitoring and management. My name is Jeff Hayward, and with me, I have some very special guests who I will introduce in a moment. We're going to answer these questions. Why is remote monitoring a must-have for integrators? How is it going to help you build and sustain positive long-term relationships with your customers? And how can it be operationalized to gain efficiency, value, and additional income with your service model? So here I have Nikolai Landschultz from Indigo Zest, James Ratcliffe from HomePlay, both of whom are prominent integrators in the industry and Control4 certified showroom dealers. And we also have Evan Marty, Principal Product Manager for the Snap AV and Control4 remote monitoring platform, Oversee. Welcome to all three of you.
Thank you.
Hey Jeff, how you doing?
Very good, very good. So Nikolai, James and Evan, we're going to get straight into this. Why is remote monitoring a must-have for all integrators? And Nikolai, do you want to pick that one up first?
Sure. I mean, for us, service is key to our offering to our customers, looking after them on a long-term basis. And if we couldn't monitor the systems that we've got out there, we would have no idea of what's going on, what's up, what's down. And I think it's more than just monitoring. It's all that interaction you get with the system, the way you can remotely access it and service it. So, you know, we could roll the truck every time a customer has an issue, but with remote monitoring and remote access, we're able to solve a huge proportion of problems remotely, which increases response time, increases customer satisfaction, lowers cost for everyone. It is an absolute must-have.
And James, the more technology there is in people's houses, the more important it is to know what's going on with it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I cannot imagine running our business now without the remote connectivity that we have to our clients' homes. We used to have to do it all over VPNs, and it was complex and with security issues and what have you. But now being able to just do it through Oversee just makes life way easier. I genuinely can't imagine running a business doing what we do without that.
And Nikolai's right, isn't he, Evan? The fewer the truck rolls, the more profitable your business will be.
Yeah, both of it really. When you look at it from an end customer perspective, you know, the people who you all do work for, really, they don't want to experience any downtime. And as much as a service call is a disruption in your daily business, thinking about it from your customer's perspective, being able to shorten or even eliminate their downtime is really the value of remote management.
He's right, isn't he, Nikolai? It's about building good customer relationships.
Absolutely. Good long-term customer relationships adds value to your business, adds value to them. After all, our customers would have spent a significant amount of money on a system, and they don't want to see it as a one-time investment. They want to use that over time, and that requires upkeep of the systems. Absolutely.
Over the years, James, have you changed your attitude to RMM? I mean, do you look at it now as more of a revenue stream, perhaps, than it was before?
We've been trying to figure out ways of looking after our customers and maintaining the relationships, but making sure it's profitable as well. And we've tried various different things over the years, but I would say that it's an essential thing to be able to maintain your relationships and make sure that you are looking after people and that they're not. One of the biggest things we hear a lot is we get people coming to us saying that I've got a Control4 system and I can't get hold of the guy anymore. Will you help us look after it? And we pick up a lot of business off that. And over the years, I can only think of less than a handful, maybe 2 or 3 customers that we've ever lost, that we've chosen to lose at any rate. And I think just having a proper service system in place has helped us do that. We work really hard. I mean, it used to just be me answering the phone at all hours of the day. As we've grown up, we've got a bit of a better system for that. But much to my wife's a bit more pleased about that now these days. So yeah, and Oversee just enables us to do a better job of that.
So tell us a bit more about that journey and the steps that you've taken from not having any remote monitoring service at all to where you are now.
Yeah, well, we've been using VPNs for years and years and years. and we found them, really, really useful, but it did take a reasonable amount of technical chops to kind of set it all up, and to make sure that it was secure. Whereas Oversee has just made that so much easier. We just plug the box in, type in the account details, do a bit of labeling and what have you. And the more labeling that you do, I must say, these systems, you need to allow enough time to set them up properly. As part of, so when you're doing the job, don't just allow enough time to configure the network and plug the speakers in and what have you. You need to allow, depending on the size of the system, at least a few hours to properly configure the Oversee. And that time spent at the beginning, you will massively save in the long run. Because when those clients do call up and say, oh, my telly doesn't work, being able to see all the notes and everything within Oversee, and it's all kind of in there if you fill it in. It's like any system. It's kind of, you get in what you put out of it, and making sure that it's properly done in the first place will save you a ton of time.
What about your journey, Nikolai? Because you're from an IT background, and that's how you moved into home automation. So you were quite familiar, I'd imagine, with this sort of remote service.
Yeah, that's right. I used to work in the corporate sector in banking, and at one point I was running global networks for one of the banks, and I was used to having a monitoring screen on my desk so I could see what was going on. So when I went into the integrator business, it felt natural that you have to look after these customers. And like James, we started with VPNs as well, and it gets very convoluted very quickly because it's just not the same. And a VPN is a way of accessing a system. It's not a way of getting feedback from a monitoring system that tells you what's going on. So really, you're only looking into it when the customer's phoned you up and said there's an issue. With the monitoring, you get an opportunity to be told and be a little bit more proactive with your customers. So we quickly adopted a different platform to Oversee at the time, and it was great. Works well, but actually when Oversee then came to the UK as part of the whole Snap AV Control4 acquisition, it was pretty much a no-brainer to go down that route, and we've quickly swapped the old platform out for the Oversee platform, and we see the benefit with the enhanced integration that we get.
Do you find that, Evan, that a lot of integrators might have issues when they're trying to scale a remote monitoring platform as part of their business?
Yeah, I think just to go on the line that you, the original questioning too was, what we normally see is we see people using a remote management solution like Oversee. Really, I think James kind of hit on it, is first to restore their own sanity, right? Like I need to be able to have nights and weekends off. It's sacrificing time away from my family. It's doing all this. So that's kind of the first, toe in the water, if you will. And then I think what you see is what James and Nikolai have both done is they've basically operationalized it within their businesses, to where there's a recognized benefit, like, holy cow, I can actually make this work for my entire business, and I can shift my business operations to center around remote management. And that's really what we see a lot in our customer base. And it's just it's a maturation process that everybody goes through.
What about that, Nikolai? I mean, how easy was it for you to scale up with Oversee?
Very. I mean, you and I have talked about this before. For us, the installation itself is less than 10 minutes. You pop it in on the network. You, as James said, you enter the details and you're up and running. It's spending that little bit of time configuring it and getting the details right in it. So actually, that side of it is really, really easily done. Every techie in the firm has got access to it through the two-factor authentication that we got in place. So getting it up and running is very simple. Learning how to use this is very simple. And sometimes you get a bit of hesitation from some people to begin with because they kind of feel, well, my VPN was fine or this was okay, but you have only had to have one or two service calls where you used it. You're hooked.
Can you give us a typical example of where a customer is delighted that you're fixing stuff remotely?
They're endless. I mean, the classical one would be the one where they phone up and they can't watch Sky right now, and it's classic would be because Skybox, as we know, they sometimes go down. And of course, we can remotely access it. We can access the power management device and reboot that device. That's for those of the customers, of course, who hasn't learned how to do through the touchscreens we're giving them. But still, you know, and it's a 2-minute job, and they love it, right? All of a sudden, their evening safe. They can watch the movie or watch the game or whatever it was that they were trying to do.
And you don't need to go out to a visit site to switch the power switch on,
absolutely,
do you?
Absolutely. And then you get that nice little, you know, rating back on the help desk ticket saying, "Well done, love you."
James, what about the culture of the company? Is that different now with RMM?
I think we've always been, and it's a sort of top-down thing. I'm nuts about customer service, and I'll, you know, always reply quickly to emails and pick up the phone. And I think it's enabled our guys to deal with things more easily and more quickly, not having to spend as much time on the phone to the customer. So when the out-of-hours call does come in, they can just look on their iPhone, look into oversee, see what's up, maybe remotely reboot something, and just message the customer straight back in. So it, rather than having to spend, you know, 30 minutes on the phone to them, asking them to poke around on the back of a rack, which isn't good for anyone. I don't think it's so much changed our culture as such, but it's certainly made our jobs easier to do, because I've always drilled into my guys that, you know, you've got to pick up the phone, you've got to be responsive, because people use these systems in the evenings and at the weekends. It's just one of the parts of the job that's not so fantastic, but we've got to deal with it, and oversee certainly makes it easier.
What about documentation, Nikolai?
So we've always been quite hot on having good documentation, and we've had a good structure for how we do that. But I think James mentioned it earlier as well, just having access to that documentation from within Oversee just sort of gives you that one repository you go to for everything that you need. And that, I think, is quite powerful. So you don't have to hunt for an IP address here and a login over there and something else somewhere else. It's all easily accessible. And again, just makes life easier for the techs. It improves customer service, response times, etc. So, you know, all that.
What's your take on that, Evan?
Yeah, it's fantastic to be able to. So, you know, thinking one of the great anecdotal stories I always remember is having a technician inside of a house looking for a wireless access point, and spent 2 hours looking for an access point, only to figure out that there was a hidden panel behind the master bedroom bed that had to be pulled out in order to gain access to it. So when you think about things like that, it's not just, you know, access to repositories or things like that, but it's also, you know, where is the device physically located? There's, you know, you can even keep service call history, like, hey, I was here 2 weeks ago and the thing was acting up. Here's what I did to resolve it. So you can start to identify repetitive problems or things that you thought initially were anomalies. You can actually start using the notes within Oversee to communicate to other people in your staff that may be doing the service calls on the same project, of other issues that you may be tracking. So really the notes in Oversee can be used in a ton of different ways.
And would you agree with that, James, that it's made you more efficient as a business?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the documentation is, there's several different types of that. You've got your technical drawings, and I think even the very best integrators struggle to keep all those documents bang up to date. You know, there are forever things changing on a site, things getting plugged in, maybe not quite as they were originally planned. So being able to just kind of quickly make notes on that within Oversee, yeah, definitely helps. And even down to, you know, you can use it to have a link to a Dropbox site with some photos of the rack in there, or photos of particular rooms and bits of equipment. So it's easy to very quickly reference what the customer's seeing, so that if you are on the phone to them trying to talk them through something, then you've got a better idea of what's there. And it just makes you seem more efficient as well. Because if you say, I can see from your rack that the third box down is the skybox or whatever, does it have a green light or an orange light on it or whatever? You know, all these sort of things just help make the customer feel like, man, these guys are really on it, you know?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think a number of integrators might feel a little bit nervous about talking to their clients about it in the first instance. They might feel that the client might see it as trying to charge extra revenue straight away. I mean, how do you do that sort of conversation, Nikolai?
Yeah, I mean, going back a number of years, where before we introduced as a chargeable service, it was one of those, well, this should work, so why should we? How can we charge for this? But actually, I think we flipped around, and you can. It is a chargeable service, and there is an element of giving service to the customer to it. I mean, that's what it is, and that inevitably has to cost something. And actually, we find customers come in now, and some of them will ask if we do, what do we do for aftercare, because they know that they need aftercare, and they're worried about those jobs that James was talking about, where you get somebody who you can't get your integrator back, etc. So the customers are wising up to the fact that they do need service and aftercare. So for us, it's not a large part of the conversation anymore, because it's just a standard element, and we would have it on any install that we do. There is at least 1 year's support and maintenance as part of that agreement.
We actually include it as one of the very first things that we talk about is service and aftercare, because I think it's one of the things that sets us apart. So we'll, as part of when we're giving people a tour of this place, not that we do that these days anymore, but before COVID, we would take people around and show them the equipment rack, and we show them how beautifully we build them, and then we show them the remote power switches, and we say these things allow us to remotely connect into your system. People expect that technology is going to break. The important thing is that we're there to look after it when it does, at the point of need. So when it is a Sunday afternoon and someone's got their mates around and there's a big match on and they can't get the projector to come on, that's the point when you really need the support. And that's so we make a really big point of the fact that we're set up to be able to deal with that. So we've got really quick response times, service around the clock, and that's a big part of our sales pitch, really.
So I wasn't trying to say that we're not talking about it. What I'm trying to say is it's not an issue. People will expect it nowadays.
Is that your experience, Evan? Is it pretty much expected now from most clients?
Yeah, I think there's really been a big shift in technology and smart home technology, where before, I'll say 5 or 10 years ago, I think the expectation was that once a job is complete, it should just work and work forever. And when you think about kind of how poor of a thinking that was, like, homeowners nobody makes an investment of this size without an expectation of service, right? When you think about a car, you think about a house, even jewelry. I mean, these are, a diamond ring is a non-technical thing, but there's still an expectation of service when you have a quality piece of jewelry. So the idea is you're making a significant investment in a system, and there should be an expectation of service about maintaining that system, even cleaning it, even, and doing updates, doing firmware updates, always doing security around these things. I think that the customers have gotten wise to the fact that this kind of investment does expect some sort of investment. And really that's the point of Oversee, is to really aid in that, and speed in that maintenance and service need that is now being expected by the customers.
Does that tally with your thinking, Nikolai?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. It is an expectation. I mean, we wouldn't want not to do it. I think I said it earlier as well, and echoing what Evan's saying, that huge investment that customers are making in these systems, they gotta have an upkeep. They'll have their system for a lot longer than they have their iPhones or their cars. They'll swap them out a lot more frequently than they'll swap out their system. So clearly the system, which is also a piece of technology, needs to be maintained.
And what sort of service levels or support levels do you offer within the business?
For us, it's almost like a guaranteed response within X amount of time. And we've actually partnered with Parasol so that we can offer round-the-clock 24/7 support. And I think that's gaining a larger and larger uptake. We're not set out to be able to respond ourselves at any time of day. So having a partner we can do this with, give the customers that response, that's really good. So for us, it's about that 24/7 support, first response, second response, tier 1, tier 2, and then from how quickly will we come out to the customer and see them and then rectify a problem if there is a need for a site visit. And
do those levels come at a different price point, or do you just charge a fixed fee for what you do?
No, that's obviously that's tiered. The faster that you need us to come out, the higher the monthly tiers. It's actually, for anyone who's interested, it's documented on our website, so you can go and see the sign up page.
Do you have a similar approach, James?
Yeah, very similar. We've got it all on our website too, and it's what it's really doing is just setting the rules that we're operating by. It's saying to people, we've got these choices. You can choose what sort of level of service you want to receive. So not everyone wants to pay a monthly fee to have that. It depends on the size of the system they've got. If they've just got a couple of Sonos boxes or whatever, then they might not want to pay £100 a month to have it to have someone on call, because if their Sonos doesn't work for a day, they can wait until next week to get it fixed. But if they've got lighting and heating and security and all these other things connected to it, then they're more likely to want to have that instant, immediate service. So we make it quite clear that if you want that service, that's what it costs, and everyone pays the same as well. We used to sort of suffer a bit from dealing with whoever was shouting loudest first, and now it's very clear to everyone because it's published on our website, so no one feels like they're getting special treatment or not, and it sort of just creates a kind of a level playing field that everyone knows the rules on.
And do you have your engineers, James? Are they on call in the evenings, or do you use an outsourced service as well?
Yeah. Well, I was super pleased when I managed to get them to do the out-of-hours service calls. That was a big step forward in my life a few years ago. But now we're growing, and it's difficult to ask them because we get several many tickets a week, and it depends. It goes in fits and starts, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. But you go a whole weekend without hearing anything, and then the next weekend you get a dozen calls in a day. So it's not really fair to ask our engineers to be dealing with all of that noise all the time. You just can't have a life if you can't go more than an hour or two without some grumpy person on the phone telling you their telly doesn't work. So yeah, we're like Nikolai, we're moving over to a sort of managed service. Parasol is the one that we picked to be able to just deal with that first line of technical support. And because they've got access to oversee, and this is where the quality of the documentation and the setup comes, the more information we can give those guys to be able to sort of see into the system, because they don't know the houses like our guys do. So making sure that they've got all the right information to be able to see into the system as if they were there is super important. But I think if you're trying to grow, it's really difficult trying to grow a custom installation business, and service is probably the hardest part. I think it's probably what kills most businesses once they get past sort of 3 to 5 years, because when you get to a business that's 3 to 5 years old, you've got lots of customers and all their stuff starts going wrong, and that's when they all start ringing up, and a lot of people will just see that call coming in on a Saturday afternoon and go, oh, I can't be bothered, I'll deal with that on Monday. And then Monday happens, and then you're super busy and you forget to ring them back, and you get a bad reputation, and the customers are grumpy and they go elsewhere. And I think that's oversee, and having some sort of proper aftercare system is the way of making sure that doesn't happen, frankly.
You've got to agree with that, Evan.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think there's a couple of things that both James and Nikolai have hit on there. Is that, first of all, defining the rules of what your service commitment is going to be. I think for far too long, integrators were really of the mindset is they had to provide service because customers had paid a lot of money for these systems and had the expectation of it. And at the end of the day, like your time is valuable, your time is worth money. And and defining those rules of service and support early in the process is incredibly important. The fact that they have it on their websites is really, really important and really straightforward for the customers to understand what the rules of engagement are, right? And James, like thinking through your explanation earlier, where you used to be the one that did all the service calls on nights and weekends, and then your portfolio of customers got so big that clearly you couldn't handle it yourself. So you've taken on, you encouraged your own engineers to support that. those service calls, and I assume you have some sort of you had some sort of an on-call rotation. But even then, you're burning those guys out just the same. And really, what you want to do is you want to ensure that your employees are happy and your customers are happy. And really, everybody needs downtime. Everybody needs time away from work. And being on call 24/7 is not fair to do to yourself or your employees. And that's where you see companies like Parasol or other third-party service providers that are there and provide the other thing I really like about these companies is that they're providing a consistent level, a consistent customer experience. So, when you're going through an on-call rotation or handling the calls themselves, the response is very much centered around who's answering the call, their knowledge of the system, honestly, their like of the customer or familiarity with the customer. A lot of those things change the experience, where these third-party providers don't have any of that luggage that comes along with it, right? Their job is to sit there, be professional, answer the call, provide the best customer experience possible, and move on about their day. And really, so what you see with these third-party service providers is you get a very consistent customer experience. And it changes. So not only are you improving your employees' lives, but you're also improving your customer service by always bringing the best customer experience possible, regardless of the time of day.
I think there's really interesting points talking about how it's the growing pains of being an integrator and the impact that then has upon customer service and why you need to step your game up. I mean, that strikes me as what both you and James have done, Nicola.
Yeah, I think James hit it on the nail on the head there. As we grow, it's easy enough when you've got a handful of customers supporting them. And yes, you don't mind the odd weekend or evening call, but as it grows, it just becomes unmanageable. And like James said, you'll probably end up forgetting some of them. So yeah, put a process in place, put a system in place, and get to the point where you might want to work with a third-party company with a partner for this. But absolutely.
It takes a bit of time to kind of train your clients as well to stop WhatsApping you and calling you and that. You've got to put the structure in place and be quite firm about asking them to follow it as well. So that when they do WhatsApp you, you can just have a copy and paste message that you can send back to them. It's really polite and really understanding and say, I'm sorry, but this isn't the way we do this anymore. We do have a great service, and if you call them, I'm sure you'll get just as quick and as good service as I'd always offered. But I'm like mega honest with them. I just say, look, you're a lovely customer, I love you, brilliant, but I've got like 200 people who are trying to, who we're looking after their houses, and I can't have them all ringing me at all hours of the day. And people understand that, it's not they're all, our customers are pretty smart people on the whole, and you'd have to be pretty unreasonable to not understand that and want to work with your integrator. So yeah, it's about training them and just showing them that the experience will be just as good if they don't call the boss.
Just hearing those stories, Evan, it makes me think that it's helpful to come from and see things from the integrator's perspective when you're on the manufacturer's side.
Yeah, so a good part of my career it was spent as an integrator. I spent 20 years as an integrator before switching over to the vendor side. So all the things that James and Nikolai are saying, I've walked it, I've lived it. We went through the same growing pains, and just really from having to carve out the rules, right? Because it used to be just the Wild West. A customer could call you, and inevitably they're using their systems when you're done with work, just like they're done with work. They're using their systems when you're done with work as well. So having dinner with your family, going out for the evening, whatever it is, they're using their system when you're on your own personal time. I've lived through those pains, and I always keep that as firsthand experience. When designing features and thinking through how Oversee is going to work, like that experience is always firsthand knowledge. And I feel like, I always tell people inside of our company that really those years that I spent as an integrator are invaluable when it comes to managing the product of Oversee. And when somebody asks a feature, like I understand exactly what they're going through, what the pain point is, and how important it is or how common it is. Like I get a lot of that stuff. And so having that first-hand knowledge is super, super beneficial, I feel.
And what sort of attractions? I mean, we've talked about a few of them already, but what sort of things do you think keep integrators coming back for oversee?
So from an oversee perspective, there's a couple of things that are really nice. First of all, there's visibility into the network. I think we've really done a good job about talking about connectivity into the system and taking troubleshooting actions like rebooting set-top boxes or what have you. But there's other things that really, when you're getting into the Snap product portfolio configuration of the system is, typically in the older, I should say the olden days, but previously, remote management products were set up after the job was complete, right? So you would get your system installed, you get all the programming set up, you get it all done, and then you turn your focus over to oversee. So also in that setup, you'd be setting up all your network stuff. So what we're really trying to do is we're trying to make a continuous path, a continuous journey. So we released Wi-Fi management inside of oversee. So really, you can take a job with one access point to 50 access points. It really doesn't matter. The idea is that you're setting these things up. You set up an SSID, you set up your passphrase, you set up your encryption type, and you can deploy that with a single click to any number of those access points, whether it be one or whether it be 50. You can then go back and change your channels and your antenna gain and all that stuff from a single screen. And those are big improvements in the way that Wi-Fi setup is done today, because you're going to every single device to go through that. So Wi-Fi management is a really big step forward for us, where we're doing what we're calling site level management, where it's set at once, apply to many. You're going to see that type of feature set become far more pervasive through all of our systems coming forward. But Wi-Fi management is really the first introduction of that.
One of the other things that I often hear from integrators, Nicola, about remote monitoring is that, yeah, but the license fees make it so expensive, the subscriptions that you have to continually pay. Has that ever been an issue for you?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a consideration. Any cost is a consideration for any business. And you're right, with our previous platform, we had to pay a monthly fee per installation that we had. With oversee, it's a one-off cost for the box, and there's no ongoing license fees, which is really attractive. And then if we're using that Arachnus platform, the SnapAV Arachnus networking platform, then oversee is built into it, so there's not even the cost of the box. It makes it for a really interesting proposition.
One other question, Evan, does it just work with Control4 and SnapAV products?
No, actually, that's the beauty of it. Is Oversee Pro is available. Will monitor the entire network. So any network attached device that it does, obviously, our incentive, we incentivize customers to use our product because it simply works better with our own products within Oversee. But really, you can put Oversee on any network using any hardware and receive similar benefit. Online, offline notifications. You can still remotely connect to devices. You can do a lot of troubleshooting actions, regardless of the product that's in there. If it's on the network, Oversee can connect to it. One of the things I was going to hit on around the recurring fees is prior to SnapAV and Control4 merging, I actually worked for Ahiji, which was another RMM product that's in our portfolio. It was really one of the pioneers into remote management in the residential space, and we had a recurring fee. And actually, one of the biggest things we always fought with, it wasn't actually trying to sell the dealer the importance. It wasn't really trying to recognize the value with the technicians. Where we saw the biggest struggle was trying to justify that recurring fee with a bookkeeper, because they didn't have any place to cost, right? The job is complete. They've recognized profitability. They've done all this stuff, but yet every month here comes a recurring fee hitting you over and over and over. And that bookkeeper's like, where do I cost this? Where do I put this thing? And the bookkeeper was the one that actually turned off a lot of our services on a lot of jobs because they couldn't justify the ongoing expense. So I'm really happy to say that Oversee is free and doesn't have that same struggle.
I mean, really, it seems to me just nuts not to put it on every single job that you do, because one truck roll, as Americans like to call it, or one sort of site visit is gone. The cost of the box, well, they're like 150 quid, something like that. So, you know, sending an engineer out to site costs at least that. So, so it's just insane not to just put one on every job, frankly.
And if you think you're too small to have an RMM service, well, you're going to get bigger after 3 to 5 years. So again, you better start off as you mean to go on, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And the biggest thing I'd like to throw in there too is really, you think about it, your highest cost of service is your warranty period, right? You have an obligation to make that system, to be responsive, to make the system work. The uptime is critical importance. You just delivered a new system. And you don't have the benefit of being able to charge for service. So warranty is your most expensive cost of delivering service to that customer. When you put a product like an Oversee hub in place, if you can prevent that one truck roll, that one service call, you have absolutely made money during your warranty period. You have just recognized all costs associated with Oversee just by that one truck roll.
Okay, one final piece of advice. Nikolai, what would you say to anyone?
Get into it, try it out, get a box, just test it and get comfortable with it, and then start deploying them on all of your jobs.
James, you've already told people they're nuts if they don't. So anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just think any time that you spend up front while you're still in the customer's house doing the installation, getting it set up and getting it working right will be massively saved in the future. It's like, I don't know, it's probably like a 5x time saving, I would say.
Conservative, I'd say that, but what about you, Evan?
I totally made that up, by the way.
Yeah, I think echoing Nikolai is start small, just get used to it, just get a device, get going with it, get comfortable, put it within your own home, see what you can and can't get, and literally start using, thinking about the information that Oversee is providing you from a troubleshooting and how to leverage that in a troubleshooting perspective, because what you can do is amazing. And really the thing that drives me, really my mission statement is from a remote management standpoint is I don't ever want to put a technician in a house that doesn't understand the problem, where to address the problem, have the parts and pieces to be successful on the first visit. That's what my mission is from an Oversee perspective and really from all remote management.
Very good. Thanks both of you, Nikolai and James. Great to hear the Integrators story. Really enjoyed that. And thanks, Evan, for joining us all the way from the US as well. Great to hear the insights on that particular product as well that I think integrators are going to get more familiar with and know and love. So thank you, all three of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
For more information, you can head to snapav.com/Oversee. Control4 partners can also learn more via the dealer portal, so please check those out. Thanks, Essential Install, for putting on this tech talk and hosting it for us today. And if you want to stick around, we're going to go to a live Q&A, but thank you for watching. So thank you, everybody, for joining the webinar this morning. We hope you found it interesting and informative. We're now open for a live Q&A, so please pop any questions that you have. You'll see you can either use the chat box or there's a questions box, whatever you prefer. For this Q&A, I'm delighted to be joined by Nikolai Landschultz from Integrators, who you might recognise over the last 40 minutes. Nikolai, a Control4 certified showroom dealer and integrator. Nikolai, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, thank you. I know all our systems are up and working well. I've checked our Oversee this morning, all good, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. And we're also Nick Boville. Nick, do you want to just say a few words about yourself, because you weren't on the webinar, so let's have a few words about you.
Yeah, good morning. My name's Nick Boville, sales engineer for the South and London. So work with dealers such as Nikolai on a close basis, where I help out on dealer trainings one-to-one remotely these days, as it would seem in the current climate, and help out with specs and escalations if and when they occur. So that's pretty much me in the Control4 space and Snap AV space.
Very good, very good. One of the questions that we had come in, Nikolai, a good one for you, is if you're starting off with RMM, what's the best product, do you think, to start the ball rolling with, and how would you actually go about doing it?
So I think there's a couple of things to that. One is, when you say product, I mean, that's more about the monitoring product, and clearly we've settled on overseas. So for us, the product is easy. And I think, as I alluded to in the tech talk itself, that comes without an ongoing subscription fee. Get one in and start playing with it. But the other thing is more about, how are you having the conversation with the customer? Why is this customer now going to pay for service? And I think I can understand, for us it was a difficult discussion to have initially, but actually it's become a service differentiator. There's a lot of customers who come into us expecting to have some sort of ongoing service afterwards. Some of them have heard about these uncomfortable stories about dealers being unavailable once the install is done, etc. So the conversation is a lot easier than you think it is. What you need to do is figure out what you're going to charge that customer for that service. And that's something you need to structure, whether that's an ongoing fee combined with some call out charges, or however you structure that package. That's something you need to think about. And then make sure you put your process around all of that. So actually, all right, you've sold this support. How are you now going to manage it? Who in your team is going to take the tickets? How are you going to get the tickets? So there's a few things around that you just need to think through. I'm hoping that kind of helps answer the question. Yeah,
no, good point. Nick, anything to add to that? I mean, obviously you're going to talk a good line about oversea, but what do you see integrators starting out with, and how do they migrate from whatever they start out with?
Yeah, so like Nicola alluded to, I mean, we've got like the kind of fully agnostic box that basically sits on the network and scans everything in, and gives the, which is our Oversea Pro Hub, which basically gives the integrator the ability to remote on and monitor anything on any of their customer networks. But we also have the ability to integrate with our current Arachnus lineup of network switches, wireless access points, routers. Obviously, with the router, we have the Pro Hub built into it. So if you're looking to adopt another network brand or something like that, the Arachnus side of it, and soon to be package as well, in regards to that side of things, they have the ability to also scan everything within their customers' networks as well.
And also, Nick, probably a good question for you if you are getting started. What's the training regime like? How can you actually get started, and how much time will you need to commit to get familiar with what you're going to deliver and sell to customers?
Good question. So in regards to RMM, remote monitoring and management, I mean, I've had quite a wealth of experience of working with different manufacturers in the UK with different ways of trying to roll products out with this sort of thing. And one of the main reasons I came to like Control4 and Snap is their kind of like diligence in this kind of market space, because from my point of view, always going into the field, always having to sort things out almost blind, really kind of made my life harder, and it also made the dealer's life harder and tech support's life harder. So having these things out there is really, really useful. But from a training point of view, looking at all the kind of products or services available in the market, by far, from my point of view and my experience, Oversea was by far the easiest one to integrate with and get started up, just understanding where the MAC address is and the serial number is on the Oversea box. Starting up an account where you don't need our approvals. You can log into start a dealer account from the word go by going to oversea.com and getting your first devices added into your system. And with one other thing I love about Control4 and our dealer portal and Snap AV is the fact that we have all these smart skill videos available on the dealer portal for you. I mean, I just counted now, I think we've got like literally about 7 or 8, how to claim your first device, how to do this within Oversea, all the flash of your fingertips. And we also have pre-recorded webinars. Our knowledge base is second to none with what I've worked with with other manufacturers. So there's a lot of resources there for our integrated partners to basically get started with Oversea. And you've got people like me as well to basically deliver one-to-one trainings in regards to like Oversea for our partner base as well. So we're pretty much ticking most boxes in trying to get Oversea out to dealers and also dealers feeling supported.
Got a great question here, Nikolai. This one's for you from Paolo. How do you manage the often large amount of emails that you might get coming in with using an RMM service?
So, well, I guess that's related to the notifications that we could get from the RMM portal. And I think you need to be first of all, you need to make sure you build your customer solution so that you minimize the amount of alerts you get. And then you need to decide what alerts do you want to get on email, because you don't necessarily need an alert for everything. And one of the things we've got in the office is we actually got a big screen up with the oversee sort of global view on it, so we can see all the sites, and we can then be proactive in logging in and looking at what needs to happen. And then I guess for us, the cheat, if you like, is that because we started using Parasol, actually Parasol deals with those alerts for us for the customers that are gone down the Parasol route. So we try to minimize that.
And you mentioned Parasol. We've got a question from Sean here talking about the Oversee 24/7 partners. You work with Parasol, but Nick, there are other brands out there available, aren't there, to support you if you want to go to a third party?
I believe a lot of other third-party companies are kind of getting integrated, but Parasol has definitely been the most vocal in regards to working alongside Oversee, specifically globally as well. Because one thing to understand from like the Snap and the Control4 side of things, obviously Control4's like market space globally is huge, and Snap AV in terms of state size is huge. But now with the kind of like the merger in between the two companies, it's like both brands are like at full cylinders now in regards to reaching out to global markets and getting things like Oversee out there, and things like definitely from the first instance in terms of running out with third-party service providers, Parasol has definitely been kind of leading the charge in regards to rolling out and understanding Oversee and helping dealers like Nikolai in terms of their issues on site and first line response and so on and so forth.
Got another Oversee specific question, Nick, here from Jess Carter. So currently, or are there currently any plans in the near future, to enable exploitation of documentation from Oversee?
I mean, currently there's no real means in terms of Oversee to download a config file via the Oversee portal itself. And there's a few things that you can do, like on the Oversee hub and so on and so forth, and also from the Arachnis routers. But in regards to exporting like data directly from Oversee, I mean, that is something that we're looking at for future developments and so on and so forth. But in terms of data logs and stats and so on and so forth, that's something we're looking at for the future.
And Louis asks another really good question. Any recommendations on ticketing systems that integrators can use? Do you want to have a go at that first, Nikolai?
Sure. There are loads out there. We happen to have settled on an enterprise platform, so not just for ticketing, but for our whole business, from a company called Soho, Z-O-H-O, and they have their own desk system. That's their ticketing system. So we've been using that, but there are others. I know Parasol, for example, uses Zendesk, which is another great one. I guess at the end of the day, most of these will have some sort of free trial. So I'd say explore a couple of them, figure out what works best for you, figure out what else you're using in your business process. Because for me, one of the important things is this whole data integration, so that we get a single data layer. I don't want to have to key in my customers in my CRM system, then key them into my finance system when I want to send them an invoice, and then key them into my help desk system when we want them to log tickets. So for us, it's all about having systems that talk to each other in that sense.
I think that's a really good point, Nick. I mean, RMM is all about increasing your efficiency as an integrator. It's not about getting swamped and overwhelmed with other stuff and other systems, is it?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, and in terms of what Nikolai mentioned, in terms of ticketing, and there's loads of platforms out there. Obviously, one mentioned Zendesk, and how Parasol work with that is definitely a useful tool from their point of view. But also in terms of like notifications and receiving when things go offline, you have the ability to customize exactly what you get hit with in terms of notifications. I would always advise just setting up notifications for the key devices or any devices that you're potentially troubleshooting. You wouldn't want to basically set a notification for every single device coming in and out of a network, otherwise you will be swamped. But we do have a number of ways to manage those sort of information that's coming from and generated by Oversee to your emails or push notifications and so on and so forth.
And one final question before we wrap up. Nikolai, do you combine your RMM with a periodic service, either on-site or remotely? That one's from Sean.
Yes, we do. So we've got a couple of different plans our customers can choose from. And two of those plans include either 1 annual or 2 annual maintenance visits. And they're specifically maintenance visits, not call out to fix problems necessarily, but to go out and make sure that racks are dusted down and clean, make sure that firmware is up to date where we haven't done that remotely, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think for systems of a certain size, that becomes an absolute must to do as well to help keep that system running.
I know I said that was the final question, but someone else has just popped one in the question box. So John Ireland, thanks for this one. Again, for Nikolai, on the data point, what, if any, industry-specific software are you using?
Okay, so obviously I mentioned Zoho, which is not necessarily industry specific, but actually tailors really well to our industry. From a quoting basis, we're using a tool called JetBuild. I know there's also D tools out there, which a lot of people will use one or the other. And I guess that's it from an industry perspective. Obviously, we talked a lot about that already, but yeah, I think that's probably about it.
Cool. Okay. Nick, finally, just to sum up from you, what would be the key message you want to get out there to integrators who perhaps haven't really thought about RMM to adding it to their business?
Well, like as discussed in the discussion, RMM is a huge asset to any dealer moving forward, whether you're new or you've been in the field for a long time. It's the one thing that just gives you an extra bit of control in regards to your customers, trying to get problems before your customer has basically found them themselves, which is great. So it's a really proactive kind of solution. And all I would say is, I mean, if you're a Control 4 dealer, you can get on board in terms of purchasing a Control 4, a Oversea Pro Harbor or an Arachnus router, and soon to be on the package side as well in the coming weeks or month or so. And just getting out there, playing with it, testing on your own solution systems, and then rolling out with your customers. And then it's a great service for all levels in terms of trying to understand and manage their systems.
And for the long term, Nikolai, let's be clear about it. It's a great way to build relationships with your customers who will keep coming back to you for more projects and more business in the future, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is about that long-term relationship. Like you said, more business from them, but also hopefully referrals to their friends and mates who wants a system, etc. And I think, like we spoke about on the Tech Talk itself, it also, we use it as part of takeovers. So we will go out and get called out by potential customers who haven't got contact with the dealer, etc. And we will put it in there, and all of a sudden they see a whole different level of service that they have not been able to experience before. So it is part of the long term. There's potentially also here a way of looking this as a way of building you in your business. How do you value a business like ours when we all come to retire one day? And having a recurring stream of revenue is definitely something that potential investors will look at.
Yeah, think about the future. I know I keep trying to wrap this up, but someone else has just popped in another question. Nick, you can take this one. Any intention to include monitoring of Zigbee devices under Oversea?
You're on mute, Nick.
We've lost you, Nick. Still can't hear Nick. Let's give him a moment trying to get back.
What I would say on Nick's behalf then is
go for it, Nikolai.
We certainly noticed that when you look at the Control 4 controllers inside of Oversea, you can see the Zigbee devices in there. So there is definitely some level of monitoring already. We're not necessarily getting alerts coming through yet, but I'd imagine that would be on the roadmap somewhere.
I'd imagine it's on the roadmap somewhere. Jess, I'll ask Nick to email you afterwards with a explanation, but thanks, guys. Since I've lost Nick completely, we'll say goodbye now. Nikolai, thanks for your time. It's been great.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time on this Q&A. I've popped up a couple of email addresses there for you. If any of our listeners or viewers want to ask some more questions, go ahead and get in touch with Nick or Ella. I'm excited to help you. Thank you for watching. It's been great being with you, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thank you.